it has to do with the connector on there.
Yeah.
So that's the thing they have to figure out. So I guess that the biggest announcement is that I'm gonna try to scale this back to maybe do every other week for now to make it not a weekly show. But
last week, of course, or 2 weeks ago now, you had the Summer Replacement Series, the special episode with that special guest co-host
character,
with a man that had been almost kidnapped and almost murdered.
Right. Yeah. I was under the impression that he had been there for like days or something like that, like one of those stories where like he had to break out or something. But like it wasn't that. It was
too bad. That would have been a much better show.
It was just some kind of psycho that he ended up meeting, and I was like, "Oh, you sweet summer child! Like you haven't lived in Hollywood long enough."
That was from somewhere else, right? Like
he was
Wisconsin
in
or Colorado.
But you know
you haven't seen Crazies till you've seen LA Crazies.
I'm saying like I know I'm so sorry for your loss, but at the same time, like I think I passed by 4 people that were like that, on the way down here.
That were nice enough to let you go if you asked.
Yeah,
as opposed to what we were hoping for from his description.
Hey, are you into murder? Because like I really like to stab people, and they're like, no, not really. Okay, cool.
All right, fine.
Just wondering. Yeah, no problem. So, this is the penultimate Beatrice Sparks.
Oh, okay. There's never enough Beatrice Sparks.
Well, when I say that it's penultimate, it's because all of these markers in here are things that I have yet to integrate into a script yet. So part of the reason is because there's a lot in here, and you need to have an opinion on something in order to really sort of write a cogent narrative. And I don't really have a strong opinion on this book, and I've tried. And this is, I've been putting off this episode for maybe 6 weeks now, and
which book is this?
This is Key to Happiness, and we'll get into it because I do have a 20-page script already. But and one of the other ones is because her other writings that she did for the newspapers or whatever, they're the microfiche level of Santa Monica Library is still not open. And not only that, but like I try to do some other things because I found some other things I like the Young Research Library at UCLA, and none of those libraries are open.
No, you can't go in anywhere.
You can't go into any UCLA library. But it's kind of weird because they're still running sports games with audiences.
50,000 people in the stands.
While, the actual sort of academic work is closed to the public.
The school's closed.
And you're like, what kind of priorities are these?
But the pep rally is still on.
But the sports are still going on. And you're like, well, I see what the priority of American stuff. So I think that we're going to take a break midway, but what we're going to try is this thing that I got from a Japanese grocery store. This is Coca-Cola with coffee, and it's a caramel flavor. It sounds disgusting.
It's disgusting, and we've had a little experience with this before, where we tried the Ocean Spray cranberry coffee.
Yeah, cranberry coffee.
And it tasted like cranberry juice that someone had put a cigarette out in.
Right.
And I imagine this is going to taste like Coca-Cola.
That's complimentary.
Maybe it's stronger coffee flavor. Maybe it'll taste like someone put a cigar out in it.
Oh, yeah, I hope so. Well, I see that our star isn't here yet, so I can just do that. So...
The kitty?
Yeah, the kitty, right.
I don't know where
so this thing is just, I can just, there's only one headline for you to read because that was kind of messy, but let's just go with it.
Okay. The final spark for now.
Now, this is not something that I have done a great job on, so I may trip over my own self, but let's see. Do you know the key to happiness? Do you know?
No, I don't know yet.
Do you think Sparks does?
I am sure she does not.
The almost final Sparks episode is where we cast off our ship from Bees Island and sail onto the world of Norman Peale. But first, we're going to start our journey.
Norman Vincent Peale?
Norman Vincent Peale is
one of the most famous charlatans ever.
That is the one coming up after this. Yeah, so it's going to be fun. So, A Key to Happiness, right here, it looks like a self-help book, and some of it is. But most of it is something else, and it's something far older. And prior to around 1900, there was another genre of literature that which used to be quite popular, but survived into the 20th century, in some kind of kneecapped form. In your lifetime, it's become a non-specified genre that includes such things as a hostess and party planning books, and social guidance films such as Boys Beware and Perverted for Profit, which make a callback to some of our earliest episodes from last year.
Boys Beware, an excellent motion picture.
Yeah, I don't know about the remake. Maybe they should redub the audio.
It could never be as good.
I mean, Culver City looks really nice in that one. Okay, so it's prior to the rise of self-help literature, these were collectively called conduct books, essentially learning to behave literature written for either children or the ruffian rabble. So it's stuff like, this is how you're supposed to behave in high class society. And a lot of it was for immigrant groups. Back when Henry Ford would have like kind of Pinkertons, if you will, that would sort of go into the workers' houses to make sure that they were doing Americanism. Right. Oh yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And so they're like, you're cooking Italian food, don't do that. Like, cook American, and trying to make them trying to grab their culture. And so whenever you have something called a conduct book, you're sort of implicating that certain conduct is unacceptable.
And who decides what conduct is unacceptable?
Right.
In this case, Beatrice Sparks.
Right, exactly. Like, is having, a prayer rug unacceptable?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It depends on where you live. Like, lots of places it's everybody's
Or
got.
apparently is eating pasta unacceptable.
Right, exactly.
Apparently it is.
So the authors of the conduct book prescribed moral behavior, believing it would lead to a stable social order and middle-class success. Basically, the reason that you're poor is because you're a foreigner. And if you acted as foreigner, then you'd be more what to do. The deviations from the conduct aren't seen as valid ways of being. Everything should be held up against an ideology as a purity test, where the adherence is the only merit. And so basically, like, how American are you? There's people doing voice training. So you still see that in Westwood.
Yeah.
How people try to is this how you get rid of your foreign accent? They're about sociability and how to conform to some aesthetic. And then I'm going to quote a girl named Margaret Kello from the University of Western Ontario. The feminine ideal required a young woman to choose correctly between submissive domesticity and willful self-interest, between the sanctity of the home and either the perilous pleasures of coquetry or the sterile distractions of erudition. The only woman's right that interested writers of the 19th century conduct books was the right of a good woman to do her duty to her family. And so it's basically, we hear about how they think the woman's place is in the home. And this is, a 200-page book describing what that means. And, saying, well, and here's the place, and here's how you arrange the things in the home.
Yes.
And here's how you prepare,
how you get ready for your husband to come home.
And so it's not arguing that premise. It's assuming that premise.
Right.
And then going on with describing the rest of it. Because there's no acknowledged alternative, such conduct books appear to have no political bias, right?
Yes.
Because
correct.
They don't go over the politics.
No one at that point was saying women should be allowed to have a job or something to say.
Right. Because the rules codified in them took on the power of natural law. And that, as a result, they presented in actuality, still present, readers with ideology in its most powerful form. It's those people that say, well, I'm not racist. It's just that whites are naturally better, and as you can see over here with our eugenic science, it's that kind of thing where you fall back and make it look like, well,
I'm just telling you the facts.
Well, one of the people that we're going to eventually go over is the Canadian fascist that wrote 12 Rules for Life.
Oh, wow!
What's his name?
He's just
he had a
mental patient.
Well, he had a brain issue. Jordan Peterson. So he's the one that sort of moved the race science logic into the modern order. So that's on the agenda eventually. So anyway, all right. So B wrote a 19th century female conduct book in 1967. Why? Right?
Yeah. You'd think it would have all been covered by then.
Right. Exactly.
But they didn't need updating.
So the jacket of the book says, in this age when so many seem so bent on so much pleasure-seeking, Mrs. Sparks brings to thinking young women a clear voice of counsel that happiness must be found within, and that it begins with an understanding of who you really are.
Now, this is the irony of apparently is lost on everyone, which is that she is preaching women should be staying home vacuuming and cooking, and she's out with a job and doing talk shows and selling books.
I mean, this is, again, part of the conservative ethos that we said beforehand, is that she believes that everyone is a carbon copy of herself, and it's only, the frivolities of life that keep them from that actualization. So she knows who you really are. You may not know it, but she does. I think we all want to think that there's some hidden pearls wrapped in the unexceptional people we meet, especially with people we grow fond of. Sparks, as we said in different ways, the last 4 episodes, truly believes that all people are basically carbon copies of herself, right? And they had to barricade themselves around this true nature by the demands of society. This is called psychological projection, and it's part of narcissism, right? But let's move on anyway. This is a delusional pattern that obsessives do. Instead of believing someone not liking something, that they think that person simply hasn't found their version yet. So the gay man just hasn't met the right woman, right? In this delusion, the projector believes what they feel either is or is secretly an aspect of everyone's life just waiting to be uncovered and discovered, right? Like, oh, the reason you don't like bocce ball is that you haven't watched a real game yet, or whatever.
You haven't had my pea soup.
Right. Yeah. You haven't done real golfing yet. It's a no true Scotsman argument, right? And does it sound unbelievable, really? Have you found Jesus yet? It's right there.
It gets right there.
Your soulmate, purpose, calling, as if these things exist for everything. The one true love that just happens to have gone to the same high school or live in the same neighborhood. I mean, what a coincidence, right? I guess everything happens for a reason, or maybe that's just one of the stories that people would like to tell themselves. And so this book is really a predecessor to Sparks' Fake Diaries. And I'm going to give you a rare exclusive behind the desk jacket book, because there was never second printing. This book is 54 years old, and that's about as old as Alice, our malign diarist, was when she wrote. Right? Because, she's fake. So she was still getting a hang of writing these fiction stories at the time. And as always, the preface of a Sparks book is a gold mine. So we're going to start there. First page, preface, first paragraph. It's very, very beginning. This book is being written mainly because of one sophomore college girl. I don't even remember her name, but this is the story. So she wrote an entire book about someone that she doesn't remember the name of.
Well, because she had already been burnt once where she claimed other books were about people. This predates this.
67.
Okay.
So
then I'm surprised she did it the second time, because she got away with pretending she didn't remember what it was, and then later
this wasn't a hit.
She did. Yeah.
So this is a very obscure book.
Okay.
So she wrote, is that so, or is it that the story has to remain unverifiable because she made it up? In fact, there's evidence of it at the end of the page.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read the end of the first page. The one that has a Roman numeral on it.
Yeah,
we're not even at the number.
We're not even.
Yeah. She looked
in the book
directly into our eyes, and her fear and timidity were now gentleness and humility. Unanimously, we voted her first attendant, even with his dismally low tally of points from the previous day. So there she is, changing the gender of the person, so important that she wrote a book about her, and so unimportant that she forgot the person's name. Right? She also misspelled the word goodbye in the first page, but let's go on.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the next page of the preface was, I might never have remembered that incident again, except on the last day of school year. My phone rang, and a sweet little voice blurted, I'm the girl whose life you changed, and I can't go home without thanking you for it. Right, now, hold on. In this phone call, not only does B never catch the name, but how the heck does the girl get her number?
And how did the girl know that, how did she know in advance that the girl knew her life? Well, none of it makes sense.
None of it. And who speaks like that on the phone?
Nobody.
Right? Says, hi, I'm so-and-so. Blah, exactly. Who's ever received a phone call like that, right? Like they would introduce themselves by name, right? And then she goes on. For a minute or two, we cried together, and being caught up in her sobs and gratitude, I forgot to ask her name again. So she will ever remain anonymous.
So she didn't identify herself when she called.
Right, exactly.
I'm just the girl who's... Okay.
Now, hold on. You couldn't do the slightest bit of homework on this, B? You, after all, are dedicating 220 pages to this person. If you voted to give her an award as a judge at a university, which is what she opened up as, right?
Right.
So, like, she unanimously
there must be
voted.
some records.
Couldn't you say, call up the university and ask who got the award?
Yeah.
I'm sure you got literature from the event. Maybe... know another person who was there since you were invited. I mean,
did she
what
keep
on
the
earth,
program
right?
if she was one of the important people?
But we're still in the preface. We haven't even touched table of contents yet.
So she's already proved she's lied before page 1.
Yeah. But we're going to do a deep dive.
On the book jacket, she's lying.
By reading an entire chapter. Yeah. Now, it's not going to take as long as you think. But this is going to just be pure bee sparks of how evil she is. So this is chapter 15, entitled You and Your Voice, starting on page 92. It's only 4 pages long, so don't worry. I'm going to get some water because... Have you ever listened to the song? Oh, try this again. You know, the single take thing, it doesn't work the way. Have you ever listened to the sound of a foghorn warning the ships away? Or that highest real whistle that only dogs can stand? You've also heard the sound of someone rubbing their fingernails on a plate of glass or a piece of chalk grating on the blackboard? These can almost be painful sounds. Voices are like that sometimes, and see, this is I didn't proofread this thing.
We should have fixed it in rehearsal.
In fact, you know what?
Read it directly from the book.
Yeah.
Page 92.
It says right there, page 92. Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe she did write this poorly, but like, okay.
It's probably likely it's misspelled in the book.
Voices
as well.
are like that. Some are so beautiful and melodic that the person could. No, fuck you. Some are so like that the. You know, this is minted forever. What am I doing here? Voices are like that. Some are so beautiful and melodic that the person could even be speaking in a tongue foreign to our ears, and we would enjoy the listening. Others are so harsh and disquieting that we can hardly concentrate on what the speaker is saying because the voice is so distracting. Now, I have commentary in here, so I'll have to go back and forth. I once had a professor who was one of the outstanding men in his field. In fact, every summer he was invited to many different universities on their guest summer programs. Yet I had to force myself to his class every day for the first few times. As if after that, I went on my own accord, right? Because his voice was so high-pitched, nasal, and twangy. Nor was I alone. Everyone who took his class took it in spite of his annoying voice. I am happy to say that a few years ago, something happened which made him take voice lessons. And now, while his voice is not pleasant at least, it is not some nerve-grating. It is surprising to most of us to hear our own voices on tape or on a recording. Oh, wait. Here's my comment. She's like a perfect Disney villain, right?
It also is the same wording, the same vocabulary, the same style that she used when she's quoting from Teenage Girls.
But those were real. Later. Those were real teenage girls. Like Jay was real. Like those legit.
Oh yes, right. They were totally real.
Totally real. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to try this one. It is surprising to most of us to hear our voice on tape or on a recording. It is amazing how different they sound. Usually higher than we expected, and with diction not as perfect as we would like it to be. Yeah, that's pretty true. I have to admit to that. Now, we don't all want to sound like Tallulah Bankhead. Who, for people under the age of 110, was that luxurious woman from the golden era of cinema that was always parodied with a long cigarette holder lying back in a couch with a husky voice saying, "Darling." Wikipedia claims she smoked 6 packs of cigarettes a day, which, if you do the math, means that she smoked continuously for 12 hours a day.
Yeah, that sounds like members of my family.
Supposedly her last 2 words...
We're all dead. Yeah.
Or codeine and bourbon. Sounds like a good life.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go back. Now, we all don't want to sound like Tallulah Bankhead. In fact, I don't think any of us would care to be that far down in the basement. But there should be a proper pitch for you, and it's usually lower than the one you are using. If you have access to a piano, try finding your best pitch by talking and matching your voice to the keyboard. Which, again, doesn't work because she said that you have to have record and then play back the voice. But let's move on. Okay. Many fine voice teachers use this method to lower a voice pitch too high. In fact, Josephine Dillon, a Hollywood voice teacher, uses this method to bring the voice of Clark Gable down to the rich bass tone that he used as an actor. Now,
I like these references from the 1930s.
That's what I was about to say. The height of Josephine Dillon's fame was about 1935. Yeah. So even then, it was a 30-year-old reference. Right. It would be like writing a book today and referring to 80s Taylor star Taylor Dane, who made "Tell It to My Heart." Tell me, everybody's seen it, but can you find keep your voice light, but as low as comfortable for your speaking cords. You don't have to have a piano. Just keep your ears open for the sound that comes out when you open your mouth. If you are embarrassed to talk to yourself, play a rather powerful, full symphony record, and you can cry, laugh, emote, or speak to your heart's content. Have you ever called a telephone number and found such a pleasing voice in the other end that you enjoyed just hearing that you had the wrong number? No. I'm sure you've called people who sounded so gruff, sour, and friendly that you are glad that you were not there in person. I mean, the judgmentalism of this woman. Anyway, how is your telephone voice? Is it smiling, low, and gentle? If it's a male on the other end of the line, does it increase his metabolism? I don't mean you should try to sound like the TV advertisements for aftershave lotion and hair tonic, but you should try to sound like a pretty personable, non-screech, female, feminine type of girl. Even if on the other end, it's only girl next door who wants to borrow your hairdryer. Think of different times in your own life and try to remember things you said and how you said them, not the faux pas, they're better off forgotten, but the times when you've met different people or been to outstanding places. Did your voice show laughter without nervous giggling, enthusiasm without yelling, seriousness without stumbling? I mean, to be honest, some people's voices are really irritating, but most are not, so I don't know. Open your mouth and work on your diction. Say tongue twisters. She sells seashells by the seashore. Rubber, baby, buggy, bumpers. She's just filling by now. She's Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Farm, barn, yarn, harm. Okay, I'm skipping. Right. Now let's try to say these with your teeth closed and see what happens. I've never tried this before. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. So, maybe it's good, I don't know. Is your voice complaining, insincere, harsh, accusing, or unconcerned? Try to say happy, cheerful, smiling, gay, peaceful, loving, kind, and using your voice and keeping it low. Did you listen? Was it pleasant? Watch your old habit pattern so that you don't say, why, well, It actually is better here because there's a bunch of quotes here. So
I'm confused about this whole thing, but finish the chapter.
Watch your old habit pattern so that you don't say, why, well, and all those other meaningless mutterings that people often use. As we've said before, open your mind before you open your mouth. The one that I like the most is, can you improve the silence? I got that from Harry Beckwith. Yeah. I'm not recommending his book, it's terrible. If you've been using, yeah, okay, and other slang expressions, discard them. Or better, still trade them in on some new ones out of the dictionary, which she doesn't actually, she doesn't recommend any. Yeah. Like maybe a thesaurus would be a more useful thing.
That's right. That would be a better choice then.
Learn to read aloud and like it. Read with soft music in the background. Pick something that goes with the mood of the music. Then choose something more dynamic in music and something more dramatic in your reading material. Actually, you could just read the dictionary or the telephone book if you had lots of time. But since time is so valuable, you might as well be studying Chaucer, Shakespeare, or the like, while you are working on your voice. She didn't mention the Bible, which...
That's surprising. Later she would.
Well, soon you'll be verbally expressing your good feelings for yourself and the world. It's an entire chapter. It's not a lot, right? Okay.
This is confusing. So she's decided to write a self-help book, mostly for women. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of people whose voices annoy her, and here's how to stop annoying her. Mm-hmm. Is that what? I think so. Yeah. And that's supposed to be self-help. Yeah. Here's how to stop annoying me, even though I don't know you.
Kids these days.
All right. So now we're trying. We're taking a little break here to try. What's the actual name of this product?
This is Coca-Cola with coffee.
But I believe this is a mainstream product. I think you can get this in an actual supermarket.
I got it from...
You bought it I
got it from a Japanese grocery store. So,
but
I've never actually seen this before.
All right. It smells like dirty Coca-Cola.
It smells terrible.
It smells terrible.
Yeah, they're both there.
Yeah, this is not as bad as the Ocean Spray.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can identify both of them, and it's fine.
Yeah, okay. It tastes like somebody poured Coke into coffee. But I don't know why you'd do that.
I mean,
it tastes like it needs milk.
Yeah, I would say that it is an accurate taste for what I expect.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily something that I find appealing.
No, it's not. It's not good. Last time we were spitting out the ocean spray.
As if I was going to pour it on his face,
I wonder if we do add a little creamer to this, if it would be better. Should we give it a shot?
Oh, okay, sure. That's okay.
I only have oat milk, so it's perfect for you.
It's okay. We can do that. Yeah, we got the time for it. So I did a smaller script this week because I was too rushed last time.
Let's see if we improve it with a little
okay.
fat.
So I dumped this entire thing out on the plants and I replaced it with a...
Why don't we just, no, don't kill the plants. All right, should we try this?
Okay.
Does it improve it?
It masks it, which is an improvement. That's true. Yeah, it is. And also, that's a better product. I mean, I like that oat milk, so it's okay.
Right, so it adds a good flavor to what would otherwise be dirty Coke.
So,
let's see.
We're going to move on. As you...
oh, it's much better now.
It is. Only because you can't taste it anymore.
Tastes like cheap ice cream.
Oh, it does. I give that to you, for sure. So if you were wondering whether we'd be hearing that scolding, judgmental shrew that we've all come to love, don't worry, she's here! So after introducing conduct and self-help genres, we can finally go back to the table of contents and appreciate the work that this truly is. It's broken up into 7 sections. Love thyself, leaving your mark, friendship, dating, and marriage, you as a career girl, the inside you, viewpoint, and accomplishment. Each section has multiple chapters. There's 36 chapters. And we're just going to choose our own adventure here. So let's start with the career girl.
Can I pause? Did she, in the beginning of this book, does she cite her credentials for telling you what to do?
No.
No. Well, she doesn't have any, but she didn't even make some up.
No, she doesn't pretend to be a doctor in this one. Well, I mean...
Later she would, if you haven't been watching every episode, later in her life she claimed to be a doctor.
So let me say,
which she was not.
They say, here's her bona fides. She completed high school and attended UCLA. They don't say that she completed high school and graduated UCLA.
Yeah.
You see that?
She attended, right.
Yeah,
that's an interesting word, attended.
Exactly. And then it goes on and says, here it is. Mrs. Sparks is the author of a number of children's books, which is interesting because I've looked hard to find these. In her papers in Utah, they make reference to, 3 words to one of them. But beyond that, I haven't found any evidence of it. And I've looked for her, and I've looked for her various aliases that she used, but I do not know.
They don't say published works.
Yeah.
But
well,
also,
maybe that's it.
She attended UCLA. Later, she would claim she had a PhD that turned out to be totally disproven.
And has written for the Santa Monica Outlook, the Malibu Monitor, and the Intermountain News.
No.
Which is true. She
wrote letters to the editor?
No, she had a column. Between 1949 and 1950 or 51, I think it is. And I've seen references to it. And again, I haven't been able to read it because the only copies are microfiche, and those rooms were closed during COVID.
Yeah.
I've gone multiple times, seeing if it's going to be open. But, I haven't had access to it yet, and there's no exception, so whatever. And so, that's about it. That's her credentials. She's a happy person. Well, that's good.
Yeah, I guess. She should be. She's a con man.
Mm-hmm. So, each section has more to... Yeah. Now, we're just going to choose the career girl, right? Now, B was super big on Susie Homemaker, so why is this here? Why is she talking about working women? Well, for her to be judgmental, of course, So let's go to page 85. There are about 29 million women in the United States working and getting paid for it. Quite another question is, are they earning the money they take home every week? Skipping. You should make yourself worth every single cent you are paid. Judging the work of woman. So even the independent working woman's main prerogative is to be subservient to men. It's pretty cool, right? But wait, if this is the hypothesis I'm working on, then why don't these women just find men in her world, right? But she can explain it. There are many more females born each year than are males. And since none of us want to share a man if we get one, and the wars are lessening our male reserves by thousands each year, some women are going to have to work. so they might as well prepare themselves to do something they like to do, and then do it in a better and then just good enough way.
So women, she said, are completely defined by men.
Exactly.
Period.
And the only reason that they have to work is because there's more women than men.
Because they can't find a man.
Mm-hmm.
If they were better at whatever it is they're supposed to be doing, they wouldn't have to get a job.
So it's a mathematical necessity.
Yeah.
And near the end of this very in-depth 3-page chapter, she lists a number of successful career girls who were unable to marry. But this was because the law didn't permit same-sex marriages. But Sparks seems to be completely unaware of the idea that perhaps they stayed free of men out of personal preference. And she lists a number of women there, and then we read on Wikipedia, and they're like, oh, they lived with a woman their entire lives. You know? Okay, she's just like
it's like Emma Goldman.
She rattled off like 20 lesbians, and she like has
Virginia Woolf. Yeah,
she has no idea that that it was. Anyway, of course she can't come to such a conclusion because once again, everyone is exactly just like her, right? So let's go to the next page of that. And so it's a new chapter, right? Dare to be you. You've heard the old expression, this is going to be racist. He may be right or he may be wrong. All Orientals look alike.
Yeah. That's actually in the book?
Yeah.
Even then that was racist.
Yeah. Okay, next sentence. I used to think that was pretty funny and true.
Yeah.
Until a European friend of mine made the same comment about American women. So it wasn't that she realized it was offensive to, a third of the world's population. But when it was repurposed to her, that's what crossed the line.
Oh, it's all right for what she's calling Orientals to look alike. But if someone can't tell regular white people alike.
Yeah, the Americans,
It's terrible. No, it's ridiculous.
And in here I have in parentheses the word sigh. So I'm supposed to sigh. Yeah. And now that we've covered 1/12 of the book, let's stop and look at one of the major themes. The one I want to focus on most is religion. This is by Deseret Books, which is run by the LDS Church, right? The only advertisements I could find for the book ran in Mormon periodicals for people of the Mormon faith. So that was the audience, right? So religion had to play a role by definition just because of the publisher and the context, right? Also, this was written 15 years after Norman Peale's Power of Positive Thinking, which is Latin with Bible quotes in nearly every page. His blending of New Thought, Protestant ethics, and honest-to-good Freemasonry, which he is.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories, but like what we'll get into that. Yeah. It's the Freemasons had their own literature that they would send to their members, and you can read that. You can read Norman Vincent Peale, and you're like, this looks really similar to each other.
So he just plagiarized what was already a cult
for
his own cult.
So let's see how religion fits into this text, right? The first sentence in the first paragraph starts out with a Bible quote, when we start numbering pages. And the entire text has a number of them throughout. And the self-help book genre in general is targeted towards Christians. So when you go up into any bookstore and they're like, believing in yourself, and it looks like it's non-religious, but then when you open it up, it's like Thessalonians chapter 2 says this and that. And you're like, okay, well. So, most of them are that, or if they aren't that, then you find out who wrote it, and the person's like a pastor somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? It's interesting to note on page 10, where we're going to read this thing. If a person reads nothing, that's right. I missed something. Sparks' dedication to God isn't as powerful as her dedication to being a real-life John Waters character, though. So it's interesting to note on page 10. If a person reads nothing but trash, that person is likely to have a pretty stark and loathsome life of his own. Well, she writes nothing but trash, right? A positive, uplifting, current kind of literature seems to be a bit hard to find at the moment. It is popular for many of today's writers to delve mostly into the dingy recesses of the sick and sewer-lined minds and lives. But you can find worthwhile reading material. Just try. If you think that was counter to like everything she's ever written beforehand, you have to wait to the next paragraph. Remember, she wrote something called young adult literature, which is young adult, So let's go on. And recently, a review came out in a Los Angeles paper about the wholesome Walt Disney movie called Follow Me Boys. You ever hear that?
Yes, actually, I know that. I know that movie.
The reviewer smugly recommended it as for little children and maiden aunts, and called it corny, which only made me feel sorry for the poor reviewer. What a sterile, unloved life he must have had, not to identify with at least one of the clean-cut, fun-loving, all-American types in the pictures. That's you. It's a call. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
And so, like, it's weird because the one that you pointed out happens to feature, like, a lot of teenage boys in it.
Oh.
Right? I mean, like, there's this running theme in her life. Anyway, she's like, you guys should really watch this one. Which, like, has a bunch of 14-year-olds. The form of Christian self-help disappears quickly, though. For instance, the word God appears 10 times in the first 3 pages. Right? She starts it out like a lot of books in the self-help genre, which I'm preparing a mighty crash course in. But for now, let's just say that they call it self-help because the basic premise is that by simply believing in a different way, the world around you will change. External forces don't exist. It's simply a matter of a behavior that you choose, right? It's kind of funny how most of these books were written by privileged Christian white people who were born rich. But I'm sure that has nothing to do with how much these people feel they can just will things into existence. Most of these people are at least mildly aware that it's merely a privilege of position that enables them to have this ability. So one of their nonsense stories always includes some safe black person, which this is also true for. By that I mean they're introduced wrapped in some protection of respectability and safety, always employed, well-dressed, behaved, and obedient. Right? Now, this sounds a bit Uncle Tom, and yeah, of course it is. In fact, let's derail this for a few seconds and get into it. Racism is never about the color of somebody's skin. It's about the social structures and institutions that are built that both categorize and label humans and define their boundaries of potential relationships with those institutions. So it's what you can and cannot do, what you're permitted to do with different kinds of institutions. Like, you know, whether you can vote or not, whether you can drink from this water fountain, whether you can attend this. In Hollywood, there were a bunch of clubs where the Jewish people couldn't attend, famously in the 20s and 30s, and they had to start the Geffen Club, right? You know, all these other things. Right? That's why it can exist between nearly indistinguishable groups, such as the Sunnis and the Shiites, the Croats and the Serbs, the Hutu and the Tutsi, the white British Protestants and the white Catholic Protestants, you know, taking the train together and having to go into different train
You wouldn't
cars.
know who was who unless you asked them.
Right. It's about division, institutions, categories, and power structures, always. The dominant group can experience them invisibly and can enjoy the convenience of ignorance. So when they say, oh, I don't see race, that's because you have the convenience of ignorance because you're in the dominant group. Yeah. So it's invisible to you intentionally. When people say they don't see race, they're saying they're so privileged that the system is utterly invisible to them. It's the largest indictment there is, really. Nobody in the oppressed group says it's invisible. Only those in the dominant group does. It needs to be for them to think that they're good people, right? Yeah. Because everybody wants to think that they're the good people, they're on the good side. So things like minstrel shows, blackface, gay jokes, Holocaust jokes, these are some of the cultural expressions of ignorance that these institutions make possible, right? They become offensive when the institutional dynamics are no longer invisible. It takes decades, and you know it's still not done. So, like, only if you're completely ignorant of the oppression does blackface look comedic to you. But then when those things surface, then it becomes offensive, right? Yeah. But eventually, when you know that you're over it, it makes no sense at all. So, for instance, if you saw anti-Irish or anti-Italian stuff, right? Like
which was prevalent at the turn of the century.
The largest lynching in American history was in New Orleans, 1893. It was anti-Italian, right? We don't realize just how racist America was towards Italians, but it's mostly gone now. And so if you saw anti-Italian, like, people wouldn't even know how to read it anymore. Yeah. Like, they'd say, I don't understand. That's how you know that you're truly past it. When it's no longer offensive, it's just confusing. Yeah. Right? So when the hypotheses of the self-help books is all you need to do is smile and think happy thoughts and riches will come your way. And when they include a completely fictional narrative of somebody in an oppressed group where that was true for them, they're really doing the same thing as a minstrel show, right? Is that they're saying, like, for me, everything was perfect, and it was perfect for this poor person over here, too. No, it wasn't. Like, that person's fake, right? And it really wasn't a derailment, because when we are talking about conduct book, it's impossible to do without loads of shaming and pushing inferiorities on the labels. that's going to come up quite a bit. So like when you're dealing with this, basically what they're saying is that, like, you need to find a man, and by that you're all of a sudden saying that, like, you can't be a single woman, you can't be a lesbian or whatever other types of things. Anyway, moving on from the institutions of systemic repression, we're going to go back to religion. By page 19, God disappears and comes back for a small cameo on page 23, but only in the context of sex. So every person who has passed or will get passed through this life will have to stand up to the sex drive, which God deposited in us, his children. I'm only reading this as which God deposited in children, because we know that she's a pedophile. Are you self-disciplined? And I'm not trying to shame pedophiles. I know most people do, but like, there can be perfectly honorable ones, but she's not one. And you can.
You're on your own there.
Okay, fine. It's all right. I like Pee Wee Herman. Are you self-disciplined enough to know God, that God put his great and wonderful drive within you that you might recreate and populate the earth? She probably meant a question mark there, but it's actually a period.
Yeah, right.
And then God disappears for 2 more pages, but he comes back for the same topic. I think God picked a pretty strange way to get babies born. But by the time she gets to about page 70, he's almost playing an uncredited role. And in the next 50 pages, he only comes up once. It's in a passage where she once again makes this very strange sexual reference, almost like she associates sex and religion. And I'm not the first to think that some people do that. And now you know what you are. You are a child of God, and you must live worthy of that honor and responsibility. Next paragraph. You are a machine that does a multitude of things. To do these, you need many, many parts, including the skin that covers you and helps regulate the temperature of your body, by means of its pores and sweat glands, and the hair and nails, which help make you attractive. The miracle of this machine is that it carries a seed with which it can reproduce itself. And so this is now me copying and pasting paragraphs and actually doing this incorrectly because I didn't actually write a transition to this next part. So there's supposed to be something right here, but somehow I lost it. So I'll have to sort of make it up and try to transition to this one. So anyway, maybe I can just skip this one.
Skipping ahead.
No. Okay, we can do it. So, essentially, what I went into there is that more of her judgmentalism towards this kind of. She's very judgmental on how women are supposed to look, how they're supposed to present themselves, how they're supposed to carry themselves, how they're supposed to, have their hair and dress and everything, like make themselves carbon copies, and so we're going to go back to page 15, and she said. In front of your mirror, stand there and run yourself down. Tell yourself every fault you've given or might have, and you will literally see your physical image shrink before your eyes. And what she's doing here is that she is being negative, and she's telling people to say, like, look in a mirror and tell yourself you're good for nothing and you're ugly and you're awful. And I guess that's it was unrelated to that, and I should have done something more of a transition. And she does this throughout the text. Yeah, it's the second theme. That's what it was. Yeah. And as she said in Go Ask Alice, Sparks is pro-anorexic. So we see here, 2 pages later, if you don't like the packaging job nature gave to you, change it. With self-discipline, diet, exercise, and a tight girdle, any woman can have a pretty good figure. Now, this sounds like terrible, damaging advice. But wait, there's more. Let's introduce body dysmorphic order. It's a mental disorder characterized by the obsessive idea that some aspect of one's own body part or appearance is severely flawed and therefore warrants exceptional measures to hide or fix it. Like maybe a tight girdle, perhaps. Some people, you might have talked about this, they're obsessed with their nose or something like that. And then you're like, I don't care. But for whatever reason, like it's the biggest thing on their agenda. It's like, I don't get it. Anyway. In this disorder, the flaws either are imagined or, as important, severely exaggerated. And body dysmorphic disorder has high rates of suicidal thoughts and attempts at suicide. It really does. It's no good. Now, suicide, that's an interesting topic when it comes to Sparks. In writing literature, there's something called kill your darlings, right?
Yes.
Something that you spend a lot of time on carefully putting into a story. It took a lot of time because it doesn't belong, so you're supposed to remove it, right? I can't help but Sparks heard that phrase and decided it meant to call off the children in her books throughout the various forms of suicide. And here, oh yes, still on page 17. See, that's what I meant to put in there. All right, let's see if I can do this. See, I've been putting this off for a long time, and this is why. I think I should get back to that one. Because I should figure out what I was supposed to say right there. This is being terrible. But I'm sure that on that one she recommends something that would relate to suicide. Oh, here it is. I know what it is. And before you say this is the worst episode ever, just go back and watch some of the early ones. It's not. Yeah, and so it's it says, be pretty. You'll have no legitimate excuse for not being lovely, feminine, or worth wanting. Let me remind you again that a full-length mirror is your best friend. It won't exaggerate. Yes, it will.
Of course it will.
That's what body dysmorphic disorder is, right? Oh, no, this is correct. Nor will it lie to you. If your stomach protrudes or your shoulders hunch, you'll see them as they really are. And you won't. That's the whole point behind it, right?
It'll be way exaggerated in your eyes. If
exactly.
you think your stomach is hanging over your belt,
especially if you stare at it.
It's definitely going to be a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you stare at it a lot, right? And so the question is, could she actually be this callous, reckless, and encourage it? And it is. But, like, it's Sparks, so it always gets worse, right? So your human friends will hesitate to admit to your faults or fear of hurting your feelings, but your mirror knows best. And so if I say, oh my God, Larry, my nose is so fucked up, and you're like, oh, it's fine. She just said, oh, your human friends will hesitate to admit to your faults. So expect you to say, no, it's fine.
Right.
But then when you stand back
really
in the
mean
mirror,
yes, yeah.
know that the mirror doesn't lie to me, and that my nose really is truly fucked up.
She is encouraging body dysmorphia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. She's giving you a framework to do it. She's
believe yourself.
Encouraging the primary mechanism of mental disorder that's highly linked to suicide in children. A child psychologist, right?
And
a doctor.
To things like cutting and self-hate.
Yeah, maybe Dr. Mengele.
Yeah.
The entire next chapter is called Self-Discipline, and it's 8 pages long. And it's basically how to be anorexic. And, when we come back to it in our actual ultimate, I'm going to go over it more. So I'm going to go over something that was thematic to all of these, and this is kind of our closer. And we have, okay, we can do it, sure, no problem. Is that there's a claim that some people make that we think in stories, It's essentially, this view says that unless there's a narrative structure placed around any concept, then it's incomprehensible to humans. Let's take a simple concept. You're more presentable if you bathe and wear clean clothes, right? It's pretty clear that people who look disheveled are not presentable. I don't need any more clarifications. However, many people claim otherwise. These people believe that you would need a story. Something like, I once knew a very intelligent and well-mannered boy that rushed to a job interview, and he came in sweaty and dirty. He then lost his job to somebody less qualified than himself. As if wrapping the concept in a package of nonsense makes it more digestible, right? I've come to believe that this process is helpful for some people, specifically those who are more likely to be gullible and fooled by nonsense. It's why they talk about powerful stories where, it's the picture of the one child, with a tear falling down his face. And this is why we need to sell a dictator billions of dollars worth of weapons so they can repress their own people or some terrible thing. Because they were able to make some sob story propaganda, and all these people needed to say, don't you care about the children? And then they're all completely enamored by the bullshit of it. This is how the original Iraq War happened, right? Yeah. And it was the daughter of one of the kings who said, they tore the babies out of the hospitals. That's all made up nonsense, right? I wonder for the longest time was such transparent nonsense and so convincing to some people, and why there are no facts or anything else that can dissuade them from whatever lies and propagandas are telling them, right? It's like, that's their truth and nothing else can dissuade them from it. It's crazy. And I think that's why I find Sparks so incredibly painful to read. Because someone who believes nonsense, writing more nonsense for others who also believe in nonsense. And in that way, that they all believe in what is thoroughly, these nonsense stories. It's everywhere. And she comes up with there was once this boy who did such and such and such and such. And Norman Vincent Peale, like maybe 80% of that book is imagined stories. And so we'll be going into that. So let's go to the end. Why did Sparks write fake diaries that she said were real? That was the question I was trying to answer.
Yes.
Reading this book. Can her last published work before switching to the new format answer the question? Or should we care? Are these kinds of events common in people's lives? What are the consequences and what can we do about them? And there's two core approaches to these questions. First, the insanity hypothesis. Essentially that nothing needs to be explained when you slap the crazy label on it. It's the assertion that mechanics either don't exist or they're ultimately undecipherable gibberish. So you say, well, shoot this because he's crazy, right? And that's it, right? And then we don't have to do any more further. Nutty people are nutty, right? But the second approach is that what led Sparks to do this is actually boring and normal, which is what I went over last time. This is more difficult and unpleasant. I don't want to think antisocial behavior is so common. For instance, most would like to claim that the average person wouldn't murder strangers under the, like you would like to, average person wouldn't murder strangers.
I'd like to think that.
But under the right circumstances, there's war, right? Where atrocity becomes tedious chores for citizens of decency, right? Where, like, you show how decent you are by murdering strangers. Recently, in this series, we've been exploring what I'll call the common horror hypothesis. Human darkness is intrinsically human. It's usually cloaked or conditioned away and rarely rides the waves of success. But it is something that we can all understand and perhaps have intimacy with. And what's worse, most of the time, people commit horrors. They think it's the right thing to do. They act against instinct somehow, persuaded by a fundamentally irrational faith that calls for it. Take corporal punishment, the theory that child abuse is necessary and part of a healthy child rearing. Millions of loving parents did it for centuries in what they believed was the interest of the child. Right? So that really answers the last question first. Of course we should care if we're theorizing that transgressions are frequently by sincere people working hard and exercising their highest moral agency. Right? Yes. And they think, oh, this is really tough for me to spank my child, but I know that this is the best thing for me to do. So I have to do it, right? And every bone in their body says, this is wrong.
Yeah.
But they say, well, the doctor says this is what I need to do, right? And so they're sincere people working hard and exercising their highest moral agency in doing these terrors, right? For me, the beauty of Sparks is how she's such a clean execution of trying to project the fiction of reality. Her text serves as a tight execution of a set of lies and beliefs that demonstrate all the most dangerous dysfunctions of religiosity and conservatism. These are all incidental and unintentional consequences of her executions, which is what makes them so compelling to study. She's never good enough to be convincingly believable to anyone, right? You can clearly tell it's all nonsense. Who presume it's nonsense to begin with, and in the text she writes openly, she admits to her own failings. So she says, I know this is utterly unbelievable, but it's true, and this is what happened. And you're like, no, that's utterly unbelievable, and it's not true, and that's not what happened, right? But she persists nonetheless and ends the story, right? She always does that. Well, not really. All her characters kind of just abruptly die, right? And I guess that's what we'll do to her too. Because we want to end in a good laugh, let's read her obituary.
Oh.
Totally unbelievable.
Let's go for this.
Her family and the gospel of Jesus Christ were the most important things in her life. She enjoyed working outside in her yard and helping others, and loved to walk and always kept herself in good physical shape. But she also loved to seize candy. She traveled the world, but her first love was the Lord, her husband, family, and work. She left the world a better place than she found it, and she made a real difference in many people's lives. That's true.
Yeah, it could be.
I guess that is all true. The world is certainly better without her, right? But this is not the final Sparks episode, but we're going to part ways with her for now. Eventually, after the pestilence and the research libraries will open up again, I'll be able to find some more of the final information I've been trying to get to for months now, and then we'll do a follow-up. The next time it's going to get crazier because we'll be looking behind the man behind the pulpit of Marble Collegiate College in New York City.
Norman Vincent Peale.
Correct. Mm-hmm. I've written a lot of books.
Very nice.
So that's that one. I'm sorry once again that it was such a slip shot. I didn't have a central thesis for the entire thing, so it was tough for me to sort of. And as you can see, like I still have maybe
100 things to talk about.
100 things in here that I never covered. But I couldn't get some cogent thing.
Well, you've already spent more time analyzing her book than she spent writing it.
I think so. I mean, my God, the amount of stuff that I've read on Norman Peale is just, and also, on what was happening around New York City when he was there. I've probably read about 1,000 pages on it so far, trying to figure out what this is. I'm getting into some weird hypothesis of conservatism, I think, and it's like she certainly plays a role, and Peel plays a role, but like the thing that I realized is that I was like, well, the question was, okay, was this guy involved in prior to like 1940? There were a lot of fascists in America. So the question was he involved in like the Coughlins and
Yes, that's right. I wonder.
And the answer is no.
Oh, well, yeah, he was a subtler con man than
not only,
Conklin.
but
Conklin was an outright anti-Semitic hate.
He was rabidly anti-Conklin.
Yeah.
So and if you look at the New York Times from those eras, which I read hundreds of pages of probably in their time machine, very fun name, is you can read that. Yeah, he really didn't like him. Like he was very anti-Conklin.
Conklin was also hateful, and Norman Vincent Peale's act was he was a charmer.
So you have these two people which are inarguably, very ultra-conservative, that really don't like each other. So that opens up the question of what's the difference, right? And I'm working on a hypothesis where I believe I know the difference, but
it might be the difference between trying to get someone to do it with charm and trying to get someone to do it with fear. But they were both con men, charlatans.
Well, I don't know if I believe that.
You don't believe it because you think they believed what they were saying? Oh, okay.
I think they're true believers.
They're both true believers.
I believe.
You think Conklin was a true believer? He was so filled with hate. He was, when it was legal, when it was okay, he was outwardly anti-Semitic about how Jews are terrible.
Yeah.
And you think he believed that?
Yeah. I mean, those people that write, terrible anti-Semitic texts in the 30s, right? About the protocols, the elders of Zion, and all that crap. They believed in it, right?
All right.
Now, Coughlin was probably the most successful.
Coughlin was the one making money on it.
Yeah, he was the one that. But there were a lot of groups that weren't making any money.
Yeah.
And they faced it. It's like the QAnon people, right? How they end up getting losing their family over this.
Yeah.
Like I think they truly believe it. And they're not making any money. They're believing
they're losing money,
at great cost, actually. And it's some kind of psychosis, if you will. So, no, I have no problems believing that he thought that, Jews controlled the central banks or whatever it was. Because, that's just...
right.
I mean, it's conspiracy brain. We've gone over it. But, yeah, I am... We'll probably need an episode or two on Kaufman eventually, but not yet. Oh, look, my mother joined. How fun.
What is she doing up so early?